a valley filled with trembling men, a giant whose voice shook the earth. For 40 days, no one dared to face him until a shepherd boy stepped forward with nothing but a sling and unshakable faith. What happened next would silence a nation's fear and prove that the battle belongs to the Lord. The valley of Elah was a place of waiting. On one hill stood Israel's army, their shields raised but their courage sinking. On the other stood the Philistines, bold and unshaken. And between them was a silence filled with dread. Then came the sound, heavy footsteps, armor clanging, a voice like rolling thunder that made the earth itself seem to tremble. It was Goliath. He was not like other men. He was a giant taller than the tallest soldier, stronger than the strongest warrior. His armor shone like fire, covering his chest, his legs, his shoulders. The spear in his hand was as thick as a tree branch, its iron tip heavier than a man's sword. When he moved, the ground seemed to quake. And with every step, fear spread through Israel's camp. Goliath lifted his voice, and the hills carried his roar. Why do you even stand here ready for battle? Choose a man. Send him down to me. If he kills me, we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be ours. I defy the armies of Israel. Send me a man. His challenge echoed again and again, louder than the beating of drums. Every morning, every evening, for 40 days. But no man moved. Not one. Even King Saul, who should have been Israel's champion, felt his courage drain away. The army of God stood frozen, while the enemy mocked them. Far from the battlefield, in Bethlehem, a young shepherd named David was watching over his father's sheep. He was the youngest son of Jesse, often overlooked, but his heart burned with songs of the living God. In the quiet of the hills he had fought lions and bears, saving his flock with nothing but a sling and his courage. Alone, he had learned what others had forgotten, that the Lord is stronger than any enemy. One morning, Jesse called David. "Take food to your brothers in the camp. See how they are doing and bring me word." David rose quickly, leaving his sheep with a keeper. His steps were light, his heart eager. He had no idea what he was walking into. When he reached the camp, the air was charged with fear. Soldiers hurried, shields rattled, voices rose in nervous chatter. David left the food with the keeper and ran to find his brothers at the front lines. And then he heard it, a roar, a shadow stretching across the valley. Goliath, the giant, stepped forward, bronze gleaming in the sun, his voice shaking the air. He mocked Israel. He mocked their God. His laughter was cruel. His challenge was the same, "Send me a man." David stood still, his eyes fixed on the giant. Around him, soldiers shrank back. Some trembled, some cursed under their breath, some ran. But David's face grew hard with anger. "Who is this Philistine," he demanded, "that he dares to defy the armies of the living God?" The men near him stared in disbelief. "You are only a boy," they said. "You don't understand. He has been a warrior all his life. We are no match for him." His oldest brother, Eliab, burned with anger. "Why did you come here? Go back to your little flock of sheep. You only came to watch the battle." But David would not be silenced. His words burned through the camp until they reached the ears of King Saul. Inside Saul's tent, the air was heavy. The king sat in silence, weighed down by fear. Then David was brought before him, a shepherd boy, small and young, but with eyes that carried fire. "Let no one lose heart," David said. His voice was steady. "Your servant will go and fight this Philistine." Saul stared at him. The boy's courage seemed impossible. Finally, the king shook his head. "You cannot fight him. "You are just a youth, and he has been a man of war since his youth." But David stepped closer. His words came like a blade, cutting through doubt. "I have kept my father's sheep. When a lion came, I struck it. When a bear attacked, I killed it. This Philistine will fall like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the lion and the bear will rescue me from this giant." The tent fell silent. Even Saul could not ignore the weight of his faith. At last, the king spoke softly, almost reluctantly, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Outside, the giant still roared, and Israel still trembled. But now, in the middle of their fear, one voice had risen. It was not the voice of a soldier, not the voice of a king, but the voice of a shepherd who believed the living God was greater than the tallest giant on earth. And as David stepped forward, the valley of Elah held its breath. The camp of Israel held its breath as David stepped forward. He was small, unarmed, and unknown, yet something about his courage made even the frightened soldiers turn their heads to watch. Word spread quickly through the valley. A shepherd boy was going to face the giant. King Saul had tried to place his heavy armor on David, but the helmet slid over his eyes and the sword dragged at his side. David shook his head and removed it all. "I cannot fight with these," he said. Instead, he walked down to the brook that ran through the valley. The water was cool, whispering over the stones. David bent down and chose 5 smooth stones, each one small enough to fit in his hand but sharp enough to cut through the air. He placed them in his shepherd's bag, took his sling, and rose to his feet. Every eye followed him. The Israelites whispered in fear. The Philistines laughed aloud. And Goliath, when he saw the boy approaching, let out a roar that echoed off the hills. The giant stepped closer. His bronze armor flashed in the sunlight. His shield-bearer walked before him, though Goliath hardly needed protection. He planted his feet firmly in the earth, towering over the valley like a mountain. Then he looked at David, and his laughter turned to scorn. "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" he bellowed. "Come here, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." His words rolled like thunder, cruel and mocking, shaking the hearts of every man who heard them. But David did not flinch. His face shone with a courage no one could explain. He lifted his voice, clear and steady, and answered, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will deliver you into my hand. I will strike you down, and all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." The valley grew still. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. Then Goliath began to move. His steps were heavy, each one shaking the ground. Dust rose around him. His shadow swallowed David as he drew nearer. But David did not wait. He ran forward, swift as a deer, reaching into his bag. In one motion he pulled out a stone, placed it in his sling, and began to swing it. The leather straps whirred through the air, faster and faster, until the sound was sharp as the hiss of an arrow. Every soldier held his breath. Every eye was fixed on the boy. Then David released. The stone flew straight and true, cutting through the air as if guided by an unseen hand. It struck Goliath in the forehead, sinking deep. The giant's eyes widened in shock. His steps faltered. For a heartbeat he swayed, towering still, as if the earth itself resisted his fall. Then, with a crash that shook the valley, Goliath collapsed face down upon the ground. Silence followed. Utter silence. The Philistines froze, their laughter stolen from their mouths. The Israelites stared, unable to believe their eyes. The giant was down. The terror of 40 days lay in the dust. David did not hesitate. He ran forward, standing over the fallen warrior. With one quick motion he drew Goliath's own massive sword from its sheath. The blade glimmered in the sun. With both hands, David lifted it high and struck the final blow, cutting off the giant's head. The valley erupted. A shout rose from Israel, fierce and wild, like the roar of a lion long caged. The Philistines turned in panic, their courage broken. They fled across the fields, pursued by the soldiers of Israel who suddenly found their strength again. The ground shook with the thunder of running feet, but now it was not fear that filled the air, it was victory. David stood still in the chaos, the head of the giant in his hand, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. But there was no pride in his eyes, no boast upon his lips. He knew the truth. The victory was not his. The battle belonged to the Lord. From that day, the name of David was remembered, not because he was strong, for he was only a shepherd boy, not because he was trained in war, for he had never worn armor, but because he trusted the living God when no one else would, and with that faith, he faced the giant who made a nation tremble. And he won. Every giant falls when God fights for you. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful Bible stories that bring God's Word to life.